Rain drummed against the kitchen window at 1 in the morning as I wrestled with the leaky faucet beneath our sink. 23 years of marriage, and I was still the guy who fixed everything that broke in this house. The wrench slipped again, sending a spray of cold water across my face. "Just tell him you're going to Nana's, Mom. I'll say I'm at study group. He's too busy fixing the house to notice anyway." The whispered conversation in the hallway made me freeze. My wife Genevieve and her daughter Megan thought I couldn't hear them over the sound of running water and my occasional cursing at stubborn pipe fittings. Apparently, my plumbing skills were so mesmerizing that my wife had to find excitement elsewhere. I stayed perfectly still, water dripping from my chin onto the kitchen tiles. 23 years of marriage teaches you when to listen and when to pretend you haven't heard anything at all. "Are you sure he won't check?" Megan's voice carried that entitled tone she'd perfected since starting college, the same tone she used when asking for money, which happened with the regularity of a Swiss watch. "Richard never questions anything. He just nods and goes back to whatever project he's working on." Genevieve's voice held a dismissive quality that made my jaw clench. "Besides, your father's yacht is anchored in international waters. Even if Richard wanted to check, he couldn't reach us there." Your father. Not your stepfather. Not the man who'd been paying for everything in Megan's life since she was 8 years old. Your father. Bradley Holt, the charming yacht owner who'd walked out on his family when the going got tough, only to resurface now that his business was thriving. I heard their footsteps retreating upstairs, followed by the soft closing of bedroom doors. The house settled into silence except for the persistent drip of the faucet I'd been trying to fix. Setting down the wrench, I wiped my hands on an old towel and considered my options. I could march upstairs and demand an explanation. I could play the hurt husband and ask why they felt the need to lie to me, or I could do something smarter. I chose option 3. The next morning arrived with the kind of gray Seattle drizzle that made everything look washed out and tired. Genevieve emerged from our bedroom wearing her best concerned daughter expression, complete with dark circles under her eyes that she'd probably applied with makeup. "Richard, I have terrible news," she announced, settling into her chair at our kitchen table with theatrical precision. "Mom called last night. She's taken a turn for the worse." I poured coffee into her favorite mug, the one with little flowers that she'd bought during our honeymoon in Portland. "What kind of turn?" "Her heart condition is acting up again. The doctors want to keep her under observation, but you know how she hates hospitals." Genevieve accepted the coffee with a grateful smile that would have fooled anyone who hadn't heard her conversation with Megan the night before. "I really should go stay with her for a few days, maybe a week." "Of course you should." I settled into my own chair, studying her face. After 2 decades together, I knew every expression in her repertoire. This was her noble sacrifice face, the one she used when she wanted to appear selfless while doing exactly what she wanted. "When are you leaving?" "This afternoon, if possible. I know it's short notice, but—" "Family comes first," I interrupted, meaning every word in ways she couldn't possibly understand. "What about Megan? Doesn't she have classes?" Actually, Megan appeared in the doorway wearing designer pajamas that cost more than most people's monthly car payments. "I was thinking I could drive Mom down and stay for the weekend. Nana always liked having both of us around, and I don't have anything important at school right now. Nothing important except the $15,000 per semester I was paying for her education at the University of Washington. Nothing important except the literature classes she was supposedly passionate about, or the sorority activities that required constant funding, or the study groups that apparently met on luxury yachts." "That's very thoughtful of you," I said, refilling my coffee mug. "I'm sure your grandmother will appreciate the support." The relief on both their faces was almost comical. They'd expected resistance, maybe even suspicion. Instead, they got my complete cooperation, which clearly confused them. "You're not upset about missing our dinner reservation Saturday?" Genevieve asked, probing for any sign that I suspected something. "We can reschedule. Your mother's health is more important than some fancy restaurant. I stood up and kissed her forehead, the same gesture I'd been making for 23 years. Just promise me you'll call if you need anything. Of course I will. Another lie, delivered with the same practiced sincerity she used when telling clients that their public relations campaigns would definitely succeed. I spent the morning at my logistics company, reviewing shipping manifests and coordinating delivery schedules. The work kept my hands busy while my mind processed what I'd learned. Genevieve and Megan were planning to spend the weekend on Bradley's yacht, probably drinking champagne and laughing about how easy it was to fool the reliable husband who never questioned anything. They weren't entirely wrong about that last part. I'd spent 23 years being the steady, dependable guy who fixed leaky faucets and paid bills and asked very few questions about where the money went or why certain expenses seemed to increase every month. But they'd made one crucial miscalculation. They assumed that being reliable meant being stupid. Around noon, I received a text from Genevieve. Leaving now. Mom's condition is stable, but she needs the company. Love you. I waited exactly 2 hours before opening my laptop and navigating to Facebook. Genevieve maintained an active social media presence for her public relations work, though she'd been posting less frequently in recent months. Her last update was from 3 days ago, a professional headshot with some inspirational quote about perseverance. Megan, however, had never met a moment she didn't want to document for the world. Her Instagram account was set to public, probably because she enjoyed the attention from her 800 followers. I scrolled through her recent posts, coffee shop visits, shopping trips, complaints about professors, and photos with friends whose names I'd stopped trying to remember. Then I found what I was looking for. The first photo was time-stamped 4 hours ago. Megan standing on what was clearly the deck of a yacht, wearing a bikini that probably cost more than my monthly insurance premium. The caption read, "Sometimes you need to escape to the water to find yourself. Blessed, yacht life, your family." The second photo, posted 30 minutes later, showed Genevieve reclining in a deck chair with a champagne flute in her hand. She was wearing sunglasses and a smile I hadn't seen in months. The caption, "Mom deserves all the relaxation she can get. Our family time, us grateful." But it was the third photo that made everything crystal clear. A group shot featuring Genevieve, Megan, and a man I recognized from old family photos. Bradley Holt. He had his arm around both women, and all three were raising champagne glasses toward the camera. The caption, "Reunited, and it feels so good. Jack family yacht, sha celebration." I took screenshots of all three photos, making sure to capture the timestamps and captions. Then I sat back in my office chair and considered my next move. I could call Genevieve and confront her immediately. I could drive to wherever Bradley kept his yacht and make a scene. I could post angry comments on the photos, letting the world know exactly what I thought about this family reunion. Instead, I opened my online banking app and navigated to the education savings account I'd set up for Megan's college expenses. The account contained $43,000, money I'd been setting aside for the past 6 years to ensure Megan could graduate without student loans. I'd been particularly proud of this account, seeing it as my contribution to her future success. With a few clicks, I transferred the entire amount to my personal checking account. Then I called the University of Washington's financial aid office. "This is Richard Farrow," I said when someone finally answered. "I need to discuss my stepdaughter's tuition arrangements." "Of course, Mr. Farrow. How can I help you?" "I'm withdrawing my financial support effective immediately. Megan Holt will need to make alternative arrangements for her remaining tuition payments." There was a pause. "Sir, are you certain? We show that you've been the primary source of funding for Miss Holt's education. Withdrawing support at this point in the semester could result in her being dropped from classes." "I understand completely. Her biological father has recently returned to the picture and will be handling her educational expenses going forward." "We'll need that in writing, sir." "You'll have it by tomorrow morning." After hanging up, I drafted a formal letter withdrawing my financial support for Megan's education. I kept the language professional and avoided any mention of yachts, lies, or family reunions. The letter simply stated that due to changed family circumstances, I would no longer be responsible for educational expenses, effective immediately. I printed the letter, signed it, and scheduled it for overnight delivery to the university's financial aid office. Then I went home and fixed the leaky faucet. The repair took about 20 minutes once I had the proper tools and adequate lighting. The problem had been a worn washer that cost 37 cents to replace. Such a small thing to cause so much trouble. My phone buzzed with a text from Genevieve. "Mom is feeling much better already. Just having family around makes such a difference. How was your day?" I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Productive. Fixed the faucet and took care of some financial business. Glad to hear your mother is improving. You're such a good man, Richard. I'm lucky to have you." Another lie, but this one stung because I could remember when she used to mean it. I spent the evening organizing my home office, filing away old documents and updating my financial records. The house felt different without Genevieve and Megan's constant chatter and movement. Quieter, but also more honest somehow. Around 9 o'clock, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Megan's number. "Hi, sweetie," I answered, keeping my voice neutral. "Richard, I just got the strangest email from the university. Something about my tuition account being frozen. It's probably just a computer error, but I thought you should know." "It's not an error." Silence stretched across the connection. I could hear music and laughter in the background, the sound of people having a good time on what was probably a very expensive yacht. "I don't understand," Megan said finally. "I'm sure your father can explain it to you. Bradley always was good with numbers, wasn't he?" More silence. Then, "Richard, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about family, Megan. And the fact that yours has apparently expanded to include people who can afford yachts and champagne. I'm sure they can also afford tuition. You saw the photos." "I did." "It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You and your mother lied to me so you could spend the weekend with Bradley. That's your choice, and I respect it. But choices have consequences. Richard, please, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain. You made it clear where your loyalties lie. I'm simply adjusting my financial commitments accordingly." I hung up before she could respond. 20 minutes later, Genevieve called. "Richard, what the hell is going on? Megan is hysterical. She says you've cut off her tuition funding." "That's correct." "You can't just—" "Richard, she's in her junior year. If she can't pay tuition, she'll have to drop out. Then I suggest she discuss alternative funding sources with her father, the one whose yacht she's currently enjoying." "This is insane. You're being completely unreasonable." "Am I? Let me ask you something, Genevieve. How is your mother feeling? Is her heart condition improving?" The pause told me everything I needed to know. "Richard, save it. We both know where you are and who you're with. The only question now is what you plan to do about it." "This isn't over," she said, and her voice carried an edge I hadn't heard in years. "No," I agreed. "It's not." I hung up and turned off my phone. Then I poured myself a glass of the expensive whiskey Genevieve had given me for my birthday last year, sat down in my favorite chair, and began planning my next move. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the city clean for whatever was coming next. Monday morning arrived with the kind of clarity that only comes after a sleepless night spent making difficult decisions. I'd turned my phone back on around 6 a.m. to find 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, and 4 voicemails. I deleted them all without listening or reading. Some conversations are worth having, others are just noise. At the office, I threw myself into work with the kind of focus I hadn't felt in months. Our logistics company was handling a major shipment of electronics from overseas, and the coordination required my complete attention. Numbers, schedules, and delivery routes made sense in ways that family relationships apparently didn't. Around 10 a.m., my assistant knocked on my office door. "Mr. Farrow, there's a young woman here to see you, says she's your stepdaughter." I looked up from the shipping manifests spread across my desk. Through the glass wall of my office, I could see Megan standing in the reception area. She was wearing jeans and a University of Washington sweatshirt, and her usually perfect hair looked like she'd been running her hands through it. "Send her in." Megan entered my office and closed the door behind her. She'd been crying, though she'd tried to cover it with makeup. The effort hadn't been entirely successful. "Richard, we need to talk." "I'm listening." She sat down in the chair across from my desk, the same chair where she'd sat 3 years ago when I'd helped her choose her college major. Back then, she'd been excited about literature and creative writing. Now, she looked like someone who'd discovered that real life was more complicated than her favorite novels. "I know you're angry," she began. "I'm not angry, Megan. I'm disappointed. There's a difference. The yacht thing wasn't planned. She needed to get away and Dad offered to help. Your father offered to help by taking your mother on a romantic cruise while lying to her husband about her whereabouts." Megan's face flushed. "It wasn't romantic. They're just friends now. Friends who pose for champagne toasts while the woman's husband sits at home fixing leaky faucets. You don't understand how hard this has been for Mom. The marriage, the stress, trying to keep everyone happy." I leaned back in my chair and studied Megan's face. She genuinely believed what she was saying, which was almost more troubling than if she'd been deliberately manipulative. "Help me understand something," I said. "How long has this been going on?" "What do you mean?" "The lies, Megan. The elaborate stories about sick grandmothers and study groups. How long have you been covering for your mother's relationship with Bradley?" She looked down at her hands. "It's not a relationship. They're just—" "How long?" "6 months, she whispered. "Maybe 8. 8 months. While I'd been working extra hours to build up Megan's education fund, my wife had been rekindling her romance with her ex-husband. While I'd been planning our 24th anniversary celebration, Genevieve had been planning weekend getaways that required elaborate deception. "Richard, please. I know this looks bad, but if you could just talk to Mom." "I did talk to your mother, last night. She made her position very clear. She's scared. She doesn't know how to handle this situation." "The situation she created by lying to her husband for 8 months?" Megan's composure cracked. "You don't know what it's like being caught in the middle of this. Mom needed someone to talk to, someone who understood what she was going through." "What she was going through?" "Megan, what exactly has your mother been going through that required her to lie to me and sneak around with her ex-husband?" "You wouldn't understand." "Try me." Megan stood up and walked to the window overlooking the shipping yard. Trucks were loading and unloading cargo with mechanical precision, each movement part of a larger system that actually functioned the way it was supposed to. "Mom says you've changed," Megan said without turning around. "That you're not the man she married, that you're distant and cold and only care about work." "When did she tell you this?" "Lots of times. She's been unhappy for years, Richard. She just didn't know how to tell you." I felt something shift inside my chest, like a gear clicking into a new position. "So, instead of telling me, she decided to reconnect with Bradley and spend 8 months lying about it. She was trying to figure out what she wanted." "And what does she want, Megan?" Finally, Megan turned to face me. Her eyes were red and puffy, but her voice was steady. "She wants a divorce." The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a building that was already burning down. I'd known this conversation was coming, but hearing it spoken aloud still felt like a physical blow. "I see. Richard, thank you for being honest with me. That's more than your mother managed. She's going to tell you herself. She just needed time to figure out how." 8 months wasn't enough time? Megan's face crumpled. "This is all my fault. I should have made her tell you sooner. I should have refused to lie for her. You're right, you should have. The bluntness of my response seemed to surprise her. She'd probably expected reassurance, some gentle words about how none of this was her responsibility. But you didn't, I continued. You chose to lie to me for 8 months. You chose to help your mother deceive the man who's been paying for your education, your car, your sorority fees, and everything else in your life. You made that choice, Megan. Own it. I was trying to protect everyone. You were trying to avoid consequences. There's a difference. She sat back down, tears flowing freely now. What happens now? Now you deal with the results of your choices. Your mother wants a divorce? Fine, she can have one. But she can't have a divorce and my continued financial support for her daughter's education. Those days are over. Richard, please. I know I messed up, but I can't afford tuition on my own. If I have to drop out now, then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to help your mother lie to me for 8 months. You're punishing me for Mom's mistakes. I'm withdrawing financial support from someone who's made it clear that I'm not actually part of her family. You and your mother chose Bradley. Let Bradley handle the bills. Megan wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. He can't afford my tuition. His business is doing well, but not that well. Then maybe you'll have to get a job like most college students, or take out loans, or transfer to a less expensive school. Those are all reasonable options. You're destroying my future because you're angry at Mom. I'm protecting my own future, Megan, something I should have started doing a long time ago. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to process this new version of Richard Farrow, the man who'd always said yes, who'd always written the checks, who'd always put everyone else's needs before his own. You've changed, she said finally. Yes, I have. Recent events have been very educational. Mom was right about you. Probably, but she was wrong about one thing. What's that? She thought I'd never figure out what was really going on. She thought I was too stupid or too trusting, or too busy fixing things around the house to notice that my wife and stepdaughter were lying to me. I stood up and walked around my desk until I was standing directly in front of Megan's chair. Tell your mother something for me, I said. Tell her that the reliable, predictable husband she's been lying to for 8 months is about to become very unreliable and very unpredictable. Tell her that if she wants a divorce, she can have one, but it's going to cost her everything she's taken for granted. Richard, tell her that the man who's been fixing her problems for 23 years is done fixing anything. From now on, she can handle her own repairs. Megan stood up shakily. I never wanted any of this to happen. But you did want the yacht weekends and the champagne and the feeling of being part of some exciting secret. You just didn't want to face the consequences. That's not fair. Fair? Megan, you helped your mother lie to me for 8 months. You posed for photos on another man's yacht while I sat at home believing your stories about sick grandmothers and study groups. You took my money for your education while actively working to destroy my marriage. Don't talk to me about fair. She walked to the door, then turned back. What if Mom changes her mind? What if she wants to work things out? Then she should have thought about that before she started planning her escape route. So, that's it? 23 years of marriage, and you're just giving up? I'm not giving up, Megan. I'm accepting reality. Your mother gave up 8 months ago. I'm just catching up. After Megan left, I sat in my office, staring at the shipping manifests without really seeing them. 23 years of marriage, reduced to a conversation about tuition payments and yacht photos. It felt surreal, like watching someone else's life fall apart in slow motion. My phone buzzed with a text from Genevieve. Megan told me about your conversation. We need to talk when I get home. I typed back. When will that be? Tonight. I'll be here. But first, I had some preparations to make. I spent the afternoon consulting with a divorce attorney named Patricia Chen. She was recommended by a colleague who'd gone through his own messy separation 2 years earlier. Her office was downtown, in one of those glass towers that made everything below look small and manageable. "Based on what you've told me," Patricia said, reviewing the notes she'd taken during our conversation, "you have several advantages in this situation, such as Washington is a no-fault divorce state, which means the affair itself won't affect property division. However, if you can demonstrate that marital assets were used to fund the relationship, yacht trips, gifts, that sort of thing, we can make an argument for reimbursement. What about spousal support? That's more complicated. How long have you been married? 23 years. And your wife works in public relations? She runs her own small agency. The income is irregular." Patricia made more notes. "After 23 years, there's likely to be some spousal support obligation. However, if she's been planning this divorce for months while hiding assets or income, we can argue that she's been acting in bad faith. What do you need from me?" "Documentation, bank statements, credit card records, any evidence of spending related to the affair. Also, I'd recommend that you secure your personal assets immediately." "Meaning?" "Joint accounts should be split. Valuable items should be moved to secure locations. If you have reason to believe she might try to hide assets or run up debts, we need to protect you." I thought about the yacht photos, the champagne, the elaborate lies. "I think that's a reasonable precaution." "Good. I'll prepare the initial paperwork. In the meantime, document everything. Keep records of all communications. If she admits to the affair in writing, that could be useful for other purposes even if it doesn't affect property division." Walking back to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Control. For the first time since discovering the lies, I was taking action instead of just reacting. My phone rang as I was driving home. Genevieve's number. "Richard, where are you?" "Heading home. Are you back?" "I'm at the house. We need to talk." "I agree." "Richard, I know you're upset, but before you say anything, I want you to know that I never meant for things to happen this way. We'll discuss it when I get there. Promise me you'll listen. Promise me you'll let me explain." "I'll listen," I said. "But Genevieve?" "Yes?" "Don't lie to me anymore. I'm done pretending I don't know when you're lying." I hung up and drove the rest of the way home in silence, mentally preparing for the conversation that would end my marriage. The house looked the same from the outside, but everything felt different as I pulled into the driveway. This was no longer the home I'd been working to maintain and improve. It was just a building where I happened to live with people who'd been lying to me for 8 months. Genevieve's car was in the garage, and I could see lights on in the kitchen. She was probably making coffee, or maybe something stronger. This conversation was going to require fortification. I sat in my car for a moment, looking at the house I'd been so proud to own. The mortgage was paid off, the yard was perfectly maintained, and every repair had been completed with meticulous care. I'd spent 23 years turning this place into a home. Now it was just another asset to be divided. I turned off the engine and walked toward the front door, ready to hear whatever explanation Genevieve had prepared during her drive back from Bradley's yacht. Ready to begin the process of ending the marriage I'd spent 23 years trying to preserve. Genevieve was sitting at our kitchen table when I walked through the front door. She'd changed out of her yacht attire into jeans and a sweater, but I could still see traces of a tan that hadn't been there when she'd left for her mother's supposed emergency. Her hands were wrapped around a coffee mug, and there was a second mug waiting at my usual spot. "Thank you for coming home," she said as I hung my jacket on the back of my chair. "This is still my house, Genevieve. For now." I sat down and picked up the coffee mug. It was still warm, which meant she'd been timing my arrival. Even in crisis, she was thinking like a public relations professional, managing the presentation. "Richard, I know how this looks." "Do you?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like my wife spent the weekend on her ex-husband's yacht while lying to me about visiting her sick mother. It looks like my stepdaughter helped orchestrate this deception and then called me hysterical when I stopped paying her tuition. It looks like I've been played for a fool for at least 8 months. Genevieve's face went pale. Megan told you 8 months? She did. Was she wrong? Richard, was she wrong, Genevieve? No, she wasn't wrong. I nodded and took a sip of coffee. It was perfectly prepared, exactly the way I liked it. After 23 years, she knew my preferences better than I knew them myself. Tell me about Bradley, I said. What do you want to know? I want to know when you decided to reconnect with your ex-husband behind my back. I want to know how many lies you've told me. I want to know if you've been planning to leave me this entire time. Genevieve set down her coffee mug and looked directly at me. For a moment, I saw a flash of the woman I'd married, the one who'd been honest and direct and capable of having difficult conversations. It started by accident, she said. Last spring, I was working on a publicity campaign for that new hotel downtown. Bradley's car dealership was one of the sponsors for their grand opening event. We ran into each other at a planning meeting. And we talked. Just normal conversation at first. He asked about you, about Megan, about how life was going. It was friendly but not inappropriate. When did it become inappropriate? Gradually. He started calling me to discuss event details, but the conversations would drift into personal topics. He told me about his business, about how well he was doing. I told him about my agency, about some of the challenges I was facing. What kind of challenges? Genevieve hesitated. Money problems, mostly. The agency has been struggling for the past 2 years. I've been taking on smaller clients, lower-paying projects. I was stressed about making ends meet. This was news to me. Genevieve had never mentioned financial problems with her business. Our household expenses were covered by my income, but I'd assumed her agency was at least breaking even. Why didn't you tell me about the money problems? Because you would have tried to fix it. You would have offered to loan me money or suggested that I close the agency and find a regular job. I didn't want your help. You preferred Bradley's help? Bradley understood what I was going through. He'd built his business from nothing, dealt with the same kinds of problems I was facing. He offered advice, introduced me to some potential clients. And somewhere in there, you decided to start lying to your husband. It wasn't like that. The lying came later, when I realized that our conversations had become something more than business advice. When did you realize that? 3 months ago, maybe 4. Bradley invited me to lunch to discuss a potential client referral. We ended up talking for 3 hours about everything except business. When I got home, you asked how my day had been, and I told you it was fine. Just fine. But it wasn't fine. No. It was the first time in years that I'd felt excited about anything. The first time I'd had a conversation that made me feel interesting and attractive and worth listening to. The words hit like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. So you decided to pursue that feeling. I decided to see where it led. Bradley started inviting me to business events, networking dinners, industry conferences, legitimate professional activities, but also opportunities to spend time together. And Megan knew about this? Not at first, but Bradley is her father, and she was excited about him being back in our lives. When he invited both of us to spend time on his yacht, she was thrilled. Both of you. Yes. As a family. Yes. The family that didn't include me. Genevieve's eyes filled with tears. Richard, I never meant for it to happen this way. But it did happen this way. You made choices, Genevieve. You chose to lie to me. You chose to reconnect with Bradley. You chose to include Megan in your deception. You chose to let me believe that everything was fine while you planned your exit strategy. It wasn't an exit strategy. I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. Do you know now? She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I think so. And what do you want? I want a divorce. There it was. The words I'd been expecting since Megan's visit to my office, spoken aloud in our kitchen with the same matter-of-fact tone Genevieve used to discuss grocery lists or vacation plans. Okay, I said. okay? You want a divorce? I understand. We'll get a divorce. She stared at me across the table. You're not going to fight for our marriage? What marriage, Genevieve? The one where you lie to me for 8 months while rekindling your relationship with your ex-husband? The one where your daughter helps you deceive me while I pay for her education? The one where you tell me everything is fine while planning to leave me for someone with a bigger yacht? That's not fair, isn't it? Tell me which part I got wrong. I never planned to leave you for Bradley. This isn't about money or yachts or any of that. What is it about? It's about feeling alive again. It's about remembering who I used to be before I became someone who just goes through the motions every day. And you can't feel alive with me? Richard, when was the last time we had a real conversation? When was the last time you asked me about my dreams or my fears or what I wanted out of life? I thought about it honestly. I don't know. Neither do I. We've been living like roommates for years. Polite roommates who share expenses and occasionally attend social events together, but not like people who are actually married. Her voice was calm, almost rehearsed, as if she'd repeated this justification to herself enough times that it no longer sounded cruel. So you decided to find excitement elsewhere instead of talking to me about how you felt. I kept my tone even, but inside something tightened, a slow realization settling in that we'd been having 2 very different marriages. I tried talking to you. You were always busy with work or house projects or something else that seemed more important than our relationship. She crossed her arms, defensive now, as if bracing for an argument she'd already lost in her own head. When did you try talking to me? Lots of times, little comments, suggestions, hints. She shook her head in frustration. But you would just nod and say everything would work out, and then you'd go back to whatever you were doing. I searched my memory for these conversations and came up empty. I could remember deadlines, repairs, plans, responsibilities, but not moments where she'd clearly said she was unhappy enough to risk everything. Either I'd been more oblivious than I'd realized, or Genevieve's attempts at communication had been too subtle for me to recognize, buried under sarcasm and half-finished sentences. I'm sorry, I said finally. The words didn't come easily. I'm sorry I didn't hear what you were trying to tell me. Are you? She studied my face, like she was looking for a loophole. Yes. But I'm not sorry enough to pretend that lying to me for 8 months was an acceptable response to feeling unheard. I held her gaze this time, not backing down. Richard, you want a divorce? Fine, but don't expect me to make it easy for you. Don't expect me to be the same reliable, accommodating husband who never asks difficult questions. I could feel something shifting in me as I spoke, a line being crossed that I couldn't uncross. What does that mean? It means you're going to discover that ending a 23-year marriage has consequences. It means your daughter is going to learn that actions have results. It means Bradley is going to find out what it actually costs to be part of this family. Each sentence landed heavier than the last. Genevieve's expression shifted from sadness to something that looked like fear. Richard, what are you planning? I'm planning to protect myself, something I should have started doing 8 months ago. You're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. You've spent 8 months lying to someone who trusted you completely. You've involved your daughter in deceiving the man who's been supporting her education. You've made decisions that are going to affect all of our lives, and you've done it without considering anyone's needs except your own. My voice was steady now, colder than I expected. That's not true. Isn't it? Did you consider how I would feel when I found out about your relationship with Bradley? Did you consider how it would affect Megan's education when I stopped paying her tuition? Did you consider what would happen to our finances, our property, our shared investments when you decided you wanted a divorce? She faltered, words failing her for once. Or did you just assume that good old reliable Richard would handle all the messy details while you sailed off into the sunset with your ex-husband? The silence that followed was answer enough. Genevieve stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the kitchen floor. I don't have to listen to this. Actually, you do. This is my house too, Genevieve. Until the divorce is final, we're both going to be living with the consequences of your choices. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I'll stay at a hotel. With what money? You just told me your business is failing. Bradley's yacht is nice for weekend getaways, but can he afford to support you long-term? I watched the reality hit her in real time. The question hit its mark. Genevieve's face went pale again, her confidence cracking just enough to reveal the calculation underneath. You've thought about this, haven't you? I continued. You've realized that leaving me means giving up the financial security you've been taking for granted. You figured out that Bradley's success isn't quite enough to maintain your current lifestyle. Richard, stop. Is that why you've been dragging this out for 8 months? Because you're trying to figure out how to leave me without giving up the benefits of being married to me? That's enough. No, it's not nearly enough. We're just getting started. I stood up and walked to the kitchen counter, where I'd left my briefcase when I came home. The leather felt heavier than usual as I opened it, deliberate, controlled. Inside was a folder containing the documents Patricia Chen had prepared for me. I saw a lawyer today, I said, pulling out the folder. Divorce papers, financial disclosure requirements, asset protection strategies. Genevieve stared at the folder like it contained something dangerous. Richard, did you know that Washington is a community property state? That means everything we've acquired during our marriage gets divided equally. The house, the savings accounts, the retirement funds, everything. I know how divorce works. Do you? Because I don't think you've thought this through completely. For instance, did you know that if I can prove you've been using marital assets to fund your relationship with Bradley, I can seek reimbursement? What marital assets? The credit card you used to buy new clothes for your yacht weekends, the gas money for driving to meet Bradley, the dinners, the hotels, the gifts. All of that comes out of our joint finances. Those were business expenses. Were they? Because I have copies of your credit card statements, and some of those charges look suspiciously personal for business meetings. Genevieve sat back down heavily. You've been investigating me. I've been protecting myself. Something you forced me to do when you decided to lie to me for 8 months. Richard, please, can't we handle this civilly? We can handle it however you want to handle it, Genevieve, but you don't get to have it both ways. You don't get to lie to me and then expect me to be civil. You don't get to plan a divorce behind my back and then ask me to be cooperative. What do you want from me? I want honesty, complete honesty. I want a full accounting of your relationship with Bradley, including every lie you've told me and every expense you've charged to our joint accounts. I want to know exactly how long you've been planning this divorce and what arrangements you've made for your future. And if I give you that, then maybe we can end this marriage without destroying each other completely. And if I don't, then you'll find out just how uncooperative I can be when someone tries to take advantage of me. Genevieve stared at me for a long moment. You've changed, Richard. This isn't the man I married. You're right. The man you married was naive enough to believe that his wife wouldn't lie to him for 8 months. The man you married was trusting enough to assume that his stepdaughter wouldn't help deceive him. The man you married was accommodating enough to put everyone else's needs ahead of his own. I walked back to the table and sat down across from her. That man is gone, Genevieve. You and Megan and Bradley made sure of that. What you're left with is someone who's learned not to trust anyone who's already proven they'll lie to him. So what happens now? Now you decide how you want to play this. You can be honest with me, work together to end our marriage fairly, and try to preserve some dignity for everyone involved, or you can keep lying and manipulating and trying to have everything your way. And if I choose the second option? Then you'll discover that the reliable husband you've been taking for granted can be very unreliable when he puts his mind to it. Genevieve picked up her coffee mug with shaking hands. I need time to think. Take all the time you need, but understand that while you're thinking, I'm planning, and I've got 23 years of accumulated trust to make up for. Richard, the guest room is made up if you want to stay here tonight, or you can call Bradley and see if his yacht has space for a permanent resident. Your choice. I picked up my briefcase and headed for the stairs. Where are you going? She called after me. To my office, I have some planning to do. Richard, wait. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs and turned back to face her. What? I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry for how this happened. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did hurt me, Genevieve. And now we both have to live with the consequences. I went upstairs, leaving her alone in the kitchen with her coffee and her regrets, and the folder full of divorce papers that would change both our lives forever. The reliable husband she'd been lying to for 8 months was about to become very unreliable indeed. 3 weeks after our kitchen confrontation, I'd settled into a new routine that felt nothing like the life I'd been living for 23 years. Genevieve had chosen to stay in the house, sleeping in the guest room, and maintaining an awkward politeness that fooled neither of us. We communicated through notes left on the kitchen counter and brief, formal conversations about practical matters. She was still seeing Bradley, though she'd stopped trying to hide it. Her car would disappear for entire afternoons, returning with the kind of satisfied exhaustion that comes from spending time with someone who makes you feel young again. I didn't ask where she'd been. I already knew. What she didn't know was that I'd been busy too. Patricia Chen had proven to be worth every dollar of her considerable hourly rate. Working together, we'd assembled a comprehensive picture of our marital finances that revealed some interesting patterns. Genevieve's business troubles were worse than she'd admitted, and her recent spending habits showed a clear correlation with her rekindled relationship with Bradley. More importantly, we'd discovered that Genevieve had been moving money. Look at this, Patricia said, spreading bank statements across her conference table. Starting 6 months ago, she began transferring small amounts from your joint savings account to her personal checking account. Never more than $1,000 at a time, but it adds up. I studied the statements. How much total? $18,000. All of it withdrawn in cash over the past 6 months. What's she doing with cash? That's what we need to find out. But Richard, this pattern suggests she's been planning her exit for longer than she's admitted. People don't accumulate that much cash unless they're preparing for something. I thought about Genevieve's confession in our kitchen, her claim that she'd only recently decided she wanted a divorce. Either she'd been lying again, or her subconscious had been planning an escape route while her conscious mind was still making excuses. What's our next step? We need to secure your assets immediately. Joint accounts should be frozen or divided. If she's been stockpiling cash, she might be preparing to disappear with whatever else she can access. Can she do that legally? Technically, she has as much right to the money as you do until the divorce is final. But if we can prove she's been planning this deception for months while lying to you about her intentions, we can argue that she's been acting in bad faith. I authorized Patricia to begin the asset protection process, then drove home to find Genevieve's car missing again. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. Meeting with potential client? Home by dinner? Another lie. Her business calendar, which she'd always kept on the refrigerator, showed no client meetings scheduled for today. I was getting tired of the lies. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan. Can we meet for coffee? I have something important to tell you. I'd been expecting this call. Megan had been noticeably absent since our conversation at my office 3 weeks ago, but the university's payment deadlines were approaching. Reality was probably setting in. We met at a coffee shop near the university campus. Megan looked tired and stressed, her usually perfect appearance showing signs of strain. She'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, clutching a large coffee like it was a lifeline. "What did you want to discuss?" My tuition situation. Richard, I've tried everything. Student loans, scholarships, work-study programs. Nothing is going to cover the full amount, and the university says I have to pay by Friday, or they'll drop me from classes. Have you talked to Bradley about this? Yes. He says he wants to help, but his cash flow is tied up in business investments. He can't access the money right now. I nodded, unsurprised. Bradley's yacht and luxury car lifestyle probably didn't leave much room for unexpected $20,000 educational expenses. What about your mother? Her business is barely surviving. She doesn't have that kind of money. So what are you asking me, Megan? I'm asking you to reconsider. I know I messed up. I know I shouldn't have lied to you, but please don't let my mistakes destroy my education. I studied her face across the small cafe table. She was genuinely desperate, which meant she'd exhausted all other options before swallowing her pride enough to ask me for help. Tell me something, I said. If I pay your tuition, what happens next semester? And the semester after that? Do you expect me to continue funding your education while your mother divorces me? I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead. You should start thinking that far ahead. Because this isn't just about one semester's tuition, Megan. This is about your entire future and whether you're going to take responsibility for the choices you've made. I was trying to protect my family. By lying to the person who was supporting that family? I was 18 when this started, Richard. I didn't know how to handle the situation. You're 20 now, old enough to understand consequences. Megan's eyes filled with tears. So you're just going to let me fail? You're going to destroy my future because you're angry at Mom? I'm not destroying your future, Megan. I'm refusing to continue paying for it. There's a difference. What difference? The result is the same. The difference is responsibility. Your mother made choices that led to this situation. You made choices that supported her deception. Now you're both dealing with the consequences of those choices. But I'm the one who gets punished. You're the one who has to find alternative solutions. That's not punishment, Megan. That's life. She wiped her eyes with a napkin. What if I transfer to a community college? What if I get a job and pay you back over time? What if you ask Bradley to co-sign a student loan? What if your mother sells some of her jewelry to help with tuition? What if you both stop expecting me to solve problems that you created? Richard, please, I'm begging you. And I'm saying no. Not because I want to hurt you, but because continuing to pay your expenses would be enabling the same pattern that got us into this mess. What pattern? The pattern where you and your mother make decisions without considering how they affect other people and then expect me to handle the consequences. The pattern where I'm supposed to be responsible for everyone's well-being while being excluded from everyone's decision-making. Megan stared into her coffee cup. Mom said you'd changed. She said you weren't the same person anymore. Your mother is right. I'm not the same person who would write a check to solve this problem while pretending that your lies didn't matter. So what happens now? Now you figure out how to handle your own problems. You're an adult, Megan. Start acting like one. I left her sitting in the coffee shop and drove back to my office, where I had real work to do for people who hadn't spent months lying to me. That evening, Genevieve was waiting in the kitchen when I got home. She'd obviously been talking to Megan, because her expression was a mixture of anger and desperation that I'd never seen before. We need to talk about Megan's tuition, she said without preamble. No, we don't. Richard, she's going to have to drop out of school. Her entire future is at stake. Then maybe you and Bradley should have considered that before you decided to lie to me for 8 months. This isn't about Bradley. This is about Megan's education. This is absolutely about Bradley, and about you, and about the choices both of you made without considering how they would affect anyone else. Genevieve slammed her hand on the kitchen counter. Damn it, Richard, she's just a kid. She made a mistake. She's 20 years old and she made a series of deliberate choices to help you deceive me. Those weren't mistakes, Genevieve. They were decisions. Fine. They were decisions. But does that mean you have to destroy her future? I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply refusing to continue paying for the education of someone who's made it clear that I'm not actually part of her family. You are part of her family. Am I? Because when she needed someone to confide in about her mother's affair, she chose to help cover it up instead of talking to me. When she needed someone to support her weekend yacht trips, she chose to lie to me about study groups. When she needed someone to pose with for champagne toasts, she chose Bradley. She was confused. She didn't know what to do. She knew exactly what to do. She chose the option that gave her what she wanted without requiring her to face any consequences. Just like her mother. Genevieve's face went red. What is that supposed to mean? It means you both wanted to have your cake and eat it too. You wanted to rekindle your relationship with Bradley while keeping me around to pay the bills. Megan wanted to be part of your exciting secret while keeping me around to pay her tuition. That's not true, isn't it? Tell me, Genevieve, what was your long-term plan? Were you going to keep lying to me indefinitely? Were you planning to divorce me eventually? Or were you hoping to maintain both relationships permanently? I told you, I was confused. I didn't have a plan. But you did have a plan. You've been moving money out of our joint accounts for 6 months, $18,000 in cash, withdrawn in small amounts to avoid detection. The color drained from Genevieve's face. How do you know about that? Because unlike you, I don't lie to people I'm supposed to trust. I hired a lawyer, and we've been investigating our finances. Did you really think I wouldn't notice eventually? Richard, what were you planning to do with that money, Genevieve? Were you building an escape fund? Were you planning to disappear one day and leave me with all the bills and no explanation? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been planning this divorce for months while lying to me about your intentions and stealing money from our joint accounts to fund your exit strategy. Genevieve sat down heavily in her chair. I was scared. I didn't know what would happen when you found out about Bradley. I thought if I had some money set aside, I could take care of myself until I figured out what to do. So you decided to steal from me. It's my money too. It's our money. Money that was supposed to be used for our joint expenses and our shared future. Money that you've been secretly hoarding while lying to me about your plans. What do you want from me, Richard? I want you to stop lying. I want you to admit that you've been planning this divorce for months. I want you to acknowledge that you've been using me while preparing to leave me. Fine. Yes, I've been planning to leave you. Are you happy now? I'm relieved. Finally. Some honesty. So what happens now? Now we proceed with the divorce. But we do it on my terms, not yours. What does that mean? It means you don't get to control the timeline anymore. It means you don't get to keep lying while I pretend to believe you. It means you're going to discover what it actually costs to betray someone who trusted you completely. Genevieve stared at me across the kitchen table. I don't recognize you anymore. Good. The man you recognized was naive enough to believe your lies for 8 months. The man you're looking at now knows exactly who you are and what you're capable of. Richard. Pack your things, Genevieve. Find somewhere else to stay. I'm done sharing a house with someone who's been stealing from me. You can't kick me out. This is my house too. Actually, I can. The house is in my name only. I bought it before we got married, and I never added your name to the deed. Legally, you're a guest here. Another lie exposed. Genevieve had always assumed she had equal claim to our home, but she'd never bothered to check the actual ownership documents. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. Call Bradley. I'm sure his yacht has guest quarters. Richard, please, can't we work this out? We are working it out. We're getting divorced, but we're doing it honestly for once. What about Megan? What about her? She needs our help. She needs to learn that actions have consequences, something both of you should have figured out months ago. Genevieve stood up slowly. You're really going to do this. You're going to destroy everything we built together. I'm not destroying anything, Genevieve. I'm simply refusing to keep building on a foundation of lies. She walked toward the stairs, then turned back. For what it's worth, I really am sorry. So am I said. I'm sorry it took me 8 months to figure out who you really are. After she left, I sat alone in the kitchen, where we'd shared thousands of meals over 23 years. The house felt different without her presence, but not empty. If anything, it felt more honest. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Chen. Asset freeze is in place. She won't be able to access joint accounts as of tomorrow morning. I typed back, good. She's moving out tonight. Even better. How are you holding up? I looked around the kitchen, thinking about the question. 3 weeks ago, I'd been a married man living in comfortable denial. Tonight, I was someone who'd learned to recognize lies and protect himself from people who would take advantage of his trust. I'm holding up fine, I typed back. Better than fine, actually. And for the first time in months, that was completely true. 2 months later, I was sitting in Patricia Chen's office reviewing the final divorce settlement when my phone rang. Megan's number appeared on the screen, the first time she'd called since our coffee shop conversation. Excuse me, I told Patricia, stepping into the hallway to take the call. Richard? Megan's voice sounded different, older, maybe, more tired. Hello, Megan. I wanted to let you know that I'm transferring to community college next semester. I found a job at a bookstore near campus, and I can take classes part-time while I work. That sounds like a reasonable plan. It's not what I wanted, but it's what I can afford. Sometimes those are the same thing. There was a long pause. Richard, I called to apologize, not because I want anything from you, but because I need to say it. I'm listening. I was wrong to help Mom lie to you. I was wrong to take your money while helping her deceive you. I was wrong to think that I could have it both ways, keeping the benefits of being your stepdaughter while supporting her relationship with my father. Thank you for saying that. I don't expect it to change anything. I know you're done with both of us. But I needed you to know that I understand what I did wrong. What happened with Bradley? He's gone. His business wasn't as successful as he claimed, and when Mom needed real support instead of weekend yacht trips, he decided he wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Because you were right about him. He was great for exciting weekends and champagne photos, but when Mom needed help with rent and I needed help with tuition, he suddenly had cash flow problems. Where is your mother now? She's staying with her sister in California. Her business failed completely after the divorce proceedings started. Apparently, some of her clients didn't appreciate being associated with the scandal. I wasn't surprised. Genevieve's public relations agency had always depended on her reputation for discretion and professionalism. A messy divorce involving affairs and financial deception wouldn't have been good for business. How are you handling everything? I'm learning to take care of myself. It's harder than I expected, but I'm figuring it out. That's good, Megan. That's what growing up looks like. Richard? Yes? Do you think you'll ever forgive us? I considered the question honestly. I don't know, but I can tell you that I'm not angry anymore. Anger requires caring about people who've hurt you. I'm past that now. So we're just strangers to you? You're people I used to know. People who taught me some important lessons about trust and consequences. That's probably what we deserve. It's what happened. Whether anyone deserves it is a different question. After hanging up, I returned to Patricia's office to finish reviewing the settlement documents. The divorce had been finalized with surprising efficiency once Genevieve stopped trying to hide assets and started cooperating with the process. I kept the house, my retirement accounts, and most of our joint savings. Genevieve received her personal belongings, her failed business assets, and a small settlement that would help her get established in California. It was fair, considering the circumstances. Any regrets? Patricia asked as I signed the final papers. About the divorce? No. About the marriage? That's more complicated. Most people feel that way. 23 years is a long time to have with someone, even if it ended badly. The ending wasn't the problem. The ending was just when I finally learned the truth about what the middle had really been like. What will you do now? I'm thinking about selling the house. It's too big for one person, and it holds too many memories of people who weren't who I thought they were. Where will you go? I don't know yet. Somewhere I can start over without constantly being reminded of how naive I used to be. Driving home from the lawyer's office, I reflected on how much my life had changed in 4 months. I'd gone from being a married man with a stepdaughter in college to being a divorced man with no family connections and a bank account that was entirely my own. The transformation should have felt devastating. Instead, it felt like freedom. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Richard, this is Bradley. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to apologize for my role in what happened. I never intended to hurt you. I stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it without responding. Some apologies come too late to matter, and some people aren't worth the energy it takes to forgive them. At home, I walked through the rooms of the house I'd worked so hard to maintain and improve. Every repair I'd made, every upgrade I'd installed, every careful detail I'd attended to over the years. It had all been done for people who'd been lying to me while I worked, but the house itself wasn't the problem. The house was just a building. The problem had been my assumption that the people living in it shared my values and my commitment to honesty. I called a real estate agent and scheduled an appointment to discuss putting the house on the market. That evening, I drove to the boxing gym where my friend Tommy worked as a trainer. I'd been going there regularly since the divorce proceedings started, finding that physical exercise helped clear my mind and process the emotional upheaval of my changing life. "You look different," Tommy said as I wrapped my hands for a session with the heavy bag. "Different how?" "Lighter. Like you've been carrying something heavy and finally put it down." "That's exactly what it feels like." "The divorce is final?" "As of this afternoon." "Any regrets?" "None. For the first time in months, I feel like I'm living in reality instead of some elaborate fiction that other people created for me." Tommy held the heavy bag while I worked through combinations, focusing on technique and power. The repetitive motion was meditative, each punch a way of releasing tension and frustration that had been building for months. "What's next?" he asked during a break. "I'm selling the house, maybe traveling for a while. I've got 23 years of vacation time to make up for." "Sounds like a plan. Where will you go?" "I don't know yet. Somewhere I've never been. Somewhere without memories." "You could stay here, you know, start over in familiar territory." "I could, but I think I need a complete change. New city, new job, new everything." "Running away? Moving forward? There's a difference." After the workout, I drove home through neighborhoods I'd known for decades. The city looked the same, but I felt like a visitor now, someone passing through rather than someone who belonged here. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Patricia Chen's number. "Richard, I just wanted to check in and see how you're feeling about everything." "Relieved, mostly. And grateful." "Grateful?" "Grateful that I found out the truth before I wasted any more years living a lie. Grateful that I learned I'm stronger than I thought I was. Grateful that I discovered I don't need other people's approval to feel good about myself. Those are healthy realizations. They're expensive realizations, but they were worth the cost." "What's your timeline for selling the house?" "As soon as possible. I want to be somewhere else before the holidays. Start the new year in a new place." "Any idea where?" "I'm thinking about Colorado. Mountains, skiing, completely different climate and culture. Sounds perfect for a fresh start." After hanging up, I walked through the house one more time, turning off lights and checking locks. The routine was the same as it had been for 23 years, but the context was completely different. Each switch clicked off with a finality I'd never felt before, each lock turning with the quiet acknowledgement that this chapter was closing. The house felt larger somehow, emptied of tension, but also emptied of purpose, like a stage after the actors have gone home. Tomorrow, a real estate agent would come to evaluate the property and discuss marketing strategies. We'd talk about curb appeal, neutral colors, staging furniture to make the rooms feel inviting instead of personal. Within a few weeks, strangers would be walking through these rooms, opening closets, peering into corners, imagining their own lives in this space. They would comment on the light in the mornings, the quiet at night, the practicality of the layout. I hoped they would be honest with each other. My laptop was open on the kitchen table, showing search results for apartments in Denver and Boulder. I scrolled slowly, studying the photos more carefully than I needed to. Modern buildings with mountain views, clean lines, wide windows, places that felt intentional rather than inherited. Places where no one would know my history, or expect me to be anyone other than who I chose to be. That anonymity felt less like loneliness and more like freedom. I bookmarked several listings and started researching job opportunities in logistics and supply chain management. The work was familiar, grounded in systems and problem solving, things that made sense when people didn't. The skills were transferable, and several companies in the Denver area were hiring experienced managers. I imagined myself walking into a new office, learning new names, being judged only on competence rather than on the long shadow of a failed marriage. For the first time in months, I was planning a future instead of just reacting to other people's deceptions. My phone buzzed with one final text of the day from a number I didn't recognize. "Richard, this is Genevieve. I know I have no right to contact you, but I wanted you to know that I understand what I lost when I chose to lie to you. I hope you find happiness in whatever comes next." I read the message twice, letting the words settle. There was regret there, real regret, but also distance. I set the phone aside without responding. Some conversations are finished even when one person wants to keep talking. Closure doesn't always require a reply. Outside, rain was beginning to fall, the same gentle Seattle drizzle that had been the soundtrack to my marriage and my divorce. It tapped softly against the windows, familiar and almost comforting. Soon I'd be somewhere with different weather, different rhythms, different possibilities. Somewhere sunlight came more easily, where storms announced themselves instead of lingering quietly. I poured myself a glass of the good whiskey I'd been saving for special occasions and sat in my favorite chair, looking around the living room where I'd spent so many evenings believing I was part of a happy family. I noticed details I'd stopped seeing years ago: the worn edge of the armrest, the faint outline on the wall where a picture used to hang, the way the light pooled on the floor just before sunset. The whiskey was excellent, smooth and complex with layers of flavor that revealed themselves slowly. I'd been saving it for the right moment, and this seemed like exactly that. Not a celebration, but an acknowledgement, a toast to the end of one life and the beginning of another, a toast to learning the difference between being alone and being lonely, a toast to discovering that the most important relationship you can have is the one with yourself. Tomorrow, I would start the process of selling everything I'd accumulated during 23 years of marriage. Next month, I would move to a place where no one knew my history. Next year, I would be someone completely different from the man who'd been fixing leaky faucets while his wife planned her escape. The timeline felt surreal, but also strangely orderly, like a checklist instead of a crisis. The transformation was already underway. I could feel it in the way I made decisions now, quickly and confidently, without seeking approval from people who'd proven they couldn't be trusted. I could see it in the way I looked at potential futures, with excitement instead of resignation, curiosity instead of fear. I finished the whiskey and went upstairs to my bedroom, the room I'd been sharing with someone who'd been lying to me for 8 months. The space felt neutral now, stripped of emotion. Tomorrow I would start sleeping somewhere else, and eventually I would sleep somewhere where no one had ever lied to me at all. The rain continued to fall outside my window, washing the city clean for whatever was coming next. I was ready for whatever that might be. The man who'd spent 23 years being reliable and predictable and easily deceived was gone. In his place was someone who understood that trust had to be earned, that actions had consequences, and that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who don't value what you bring to their lives. It had taken me 4 months to learn these lessons, but now that I knew them, I would never forget. The future was waiting, honest and uncertain, and entirely my own. I was looking forward